and tear. It's been an eternity of waiting, but Doom Eternal is finally here, and it is a PC game for PC gamers. Like id's 2016 Doom reboot, Eternal is incredibly well optimized. It's hard to believe a game can look this good and run this well at the same time, but id has somehow pulled it off. Even a GTX 1650, Nvidia's $150 graphics card, and the bottom of our test bench managed to average 60 frames per second at 1080p with nearly every setting maxed out. The only limit most people are liable to run into? VRAM, which is your GPU memory, not your system memory. The more you have, the better, and you're going to need at least 8 GB to take in every visual bell and whistle Doom Eternal has to offer. It's a hard cap, meaning a ceiling on your quality settings, not something you can simply push past and accept a performance trade-off. With 4 GB of VRAM, the standard up until not that long ago, you'll only get to Doom Eternal's high preset. 6 GB will get you to Ultra, and 8 GB or higher will get you to Ultra Nightmare, which sounds like a difficulty level, but is actually the dream, the highest of Eternal's 6 presets. You have a bit of wiggle room. For instance, RTX 2060 users with 6 GB of VRAM can drop shadow quality one notch to high and raise texture pool size to nightmare and still squeak in under the 6 GB limit. Generally, the cap means the highest quality settings are out of reach for all but the best cards though, the exception being AMD's lower end cards. The RX 580 is a great deal on an 8 GB card at around $175 these days, and while performance doesn't match Nvidia's high-end RTX 2080 or 2080 Ti, it can at least run the Ultra Nightmare settings across the board and still clears 100 frames per second. That's a lot more than Nvidia's cards can do at a comparable price range. So that's the good news. The bar to entry is surprisingly low for such a good-looking shooter that emphasizes speed. For tuning settings to maximize your FPS though, there are 2 settings in particular that you'll want to look at: water quality and reflections quality. I'd start with water quality personally. Lowering it can net you a 3 to 7% boost in frame rate with hardly any discernible impact on visual quality. Yes, you might see it if you stop and look at some of the backdrops or A/B test a pool of blood. Notice, for instance, the way the highlight disappears on the left here. The differences are minor though, and the performance boost significant. Turning down reflections quality can also have a huge impact on performance. Unfortunately, it has a more noticeable impact on the look of the game as well. Doom Eternal doesn't have ray tracing support, at least at launch, but the reflections are still pretty impressive. Turning them off results in a flatter, less lively world, though you do gain quite a few frames back in the process. We recommend splitting the difference though. If you need to dip reflections quality, change it to high. You'll still get neon signs bouncing off pools of blood, but at half the cost to your frame rate. As I said though, the amount of VRAM your card is carrying is likely to be the only limit most people encounter. Doom Eternal performs well above expectations even on the lowest end hardware, a testament to id's skills. A GTX 1660 or RX 580 should be more than enough to guarantee a solid 60 frame per second experience at 1080p, which is refreshing. And honestly, Doom Eternal doesn't look half bad even at low settings, if that's what you're stuck with. While the higher quality settings definitely give this blood-soaked earth a bit more atmosphere, I came away surprised by how good the baseline version looks. Sure, you might notice a difference if you stopped and stared at a wall, but stopping even for an instant means death in Doom Eternal. Who has time to focus on slightly blurry texture when you're ripping and tearing through demons left and right? As always, thanks to MSI for providing the hardware we used for testing. 2020 is finally underway, and we'll be back soon with similar coverage of Mountain Blade 2 and Resident Evil 3.